Welcome to Beyond the Office, Building and Leading Remote Teams. I'm your host, Bill Keller. And on today's episode, we are excited to have with us Titus Kipfer. And he is an entrepreneur working out of India. It's great to have you on the show, Titus. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Bill.
Well, could you tell us, our audience, a little bit about you? You have a very unique story, and we're excited to kind of dive in and talk about that. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So I was born in the U.S., spent most of my childhood in Kenya, Africa, and then moved back in my early teens, and then been traveling back and forth to India for about the last 10 years. And it's been a long time dream of mine to move here. And so that dream became a reality in August of 2023 when we moved over here with two other families to start ProSynergy.
That's awesome. I mean, and that is a huge move because while you had lived overseas before, what business were you in before this? Because you now do bookkeeping and have a bookkeeping company where you provide bookkeeping services for companies in the U.S. using overseas staff. But you weren't in this business before, were you?
Right, yeah. So I started my first business in 2018. I was doing lawn care at the time and had just gotten married and realized that I wasn't going to be able to pay the bills cutting people's grass for my boss. And so I was like, well, I got to figure something out. And so that's when I started my first lawn care company and kind of grew it fairly slowly, pinching pennies for a number of years. And then growth sort of sped up in 2023. I sold half of it late 2022 in preparation for my move to India. And my business partner really helped me scale it pretty quickly in 2023. And now I've sold the rest of it. But yeah, that was the first company I started, and it really helped me understand business, understand how to bring value to clients. And of course, I was doing my own bookkeeping, so I learned basic accounting principles. But yeah, when we started up ProSynergy, it was definitely a crash course. Had to learn pretty quickly, and of course, we've got staff with much more experience. But yeah, that was my first business experience, was in the lawn care and landscaping industry.
Well, I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was amazing that you moved from this industry, and as an entrepreneur, obviously you are an entrepreneur, to be able to say, I'm going to pick my family up, move around the world, to start another company, but move from one industry to the next. But I think what I really want to delve into is, what is your mission? Your company has a unique mission, and we want to hear more about that.
Yeah, and this dovetails obviously with why we're in India in the first place. But yeah, our company's mission statement is create value to reduce suffering and restore human flourishing. And so it's kind of a mouthful there. We've boiled it down to as little as we can. But all of those three things are important to each one of us in our leadership here. So create value is something that it's just kind of been part of our company's terminology from day one. And our head of operations, Cut-in here, really latched onto that and is so passionate about creating value for clients. And then for me personally, reducing suffering is really important to me. And it's a big reason why we're here. When you learn about the poverty, especially in the developing world, I want to make my life count. I want to work to reduce human suffering. And we thought about end human suffering and decided that's probably a little bit too much too much of a bite to chew there. But hey, we can reduce human suffering in many ways through entrepreneurship. And then restoring human flourishing, my older brother, who's the CEO, is really passionate about that. And so, yeah, the create value piece is obviously what we're doing for our clients. Jim Rohn once said that you don't get paid for your time, you get paid for bringing value to the marketplace. And I remember when I first heard that quote, I wasn't that excited about it. I was kind of young and immature. But recently I've been thinking back, and that quote just stuck in my head. I had a really annoying coworker who was all into success, and I couldn't care less as a teenager. And so he'd make me listen to these motivational tapes by like Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn on my way home from work because I had to ride with him, and it was so annoying to me. But that quote, for some reason, just stayed in the back of my head, and now I realize, wow, there's so much truth there. So yeah, that's sort of the client-facing part of it, and then reducing suffering, restoring human flourishing. Obviously, that's client-facing as well. There's plenty of suffering that people experience when trying to do their own bookkeeping, but
Absolutely.
yeah, I would say that that's primarily focused on our community here in India, whether it's providing employment opportunities or using our profits to support different initiatives we have here. We're very passionate about using our company to make a difference in our local community here.
Well, I know that you have a goal and a desire to use your profits to open some community centers. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we set a 10-year target. We want to have 500 clients, and we want to have 50 community centers here in India. So about 10 clients per community center. And so these are small skills training centers here in India. I'm sure you've heard of the book When Helping Hurts, or you've probably heard of this concept. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish. I don't know how it goes. Feed him for a lifetime. There you go.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the idea here. Obviously there's so many needs around us. You can't go down the street in certain parts of the city without having a lot of beggars come up to you, even children. And so, that obviously pulls on your heart. But, we want to make a long-term impact. And so we're thinking about what are ways that we can break the cycle of poverty. And India is a huge country. It's, most populous country in the world, 1.4 billion people. So it seems like a drop in the bucket, but if we can provide education and career skills to just a few underprivileged people, we feel like we're doing our part. And so we've already started some initiatives in the slums and low income parts of the cities, where we're teaching women how to sew. Very simple skill, but if they can sew, they can obviously clothe their families, but also they can start a small company if they can get a sewing machine and sew for others. And so just a way that they can make a little income, improve their standard of living a bit, learn a skill, get that meaningful work. Even if they're not making much money, they're able to do meaningful work, and that improves, obviously their psychological state. And so that's one initiative. We're also doing literacy centers for kids from the slums. And India does have free government schools. And so, a lot of people from underprivileged backgrounds are able to attend those, but quality of education is pretty dismal. Often they're not able to get there. And so literacy for kids is obviously just teaching them how to read and write Hindi and English. And then we also have a computer lab in Delhi, and we're hoping to start one up here in our office in Dehradun, teaching basic computer skills. And so, yeah, those are some of the community development centers that we're working to start here and able to fund with our profits. And we have other donors as well. Yeah, that's a big part of our mission here.
That's an incredible mission. And, for those of us in the United States, people who haven't really traveled to a third world country to understand what you're really talking about, it is right in your face all the time. It's one of the things that is both, heartbreaking when you go to India, but it also really, I think in the US, a lot of suffering is kind of hidden. It's private in your home, kind of more suffering, but in India, it's right in your face and you see it all the time, and it is really impactful and can be, and many times overwhelming. So I appreciate the fact that you could do that and kind of, step outside your comfort zone to go from a very comfortable place to sometimes a very uncomfortable place to make a difference in the world. So what was really the turning point for you here in the States that led you to this place where you'd pick up and move halfway around the world?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned earlier, it's been a dream of mine really since I was 18 or 19. And, like I mentioned, I grew up in Kenya, but as a teenager, you kind of don't want to do what your dad did. So I was like, I'm staying in America. I'm not doing anything like that. But it was really when I was 18 or 19, I began reading and learning about the needs of the world. I'm a follower of Jesus, and so it's important to me to share that message throughout the world. And so learning about spiritual needs of the world, and then also the desperate physical needs of the developing world. And when I heard, statistics about X number of children dying every day to starvation and preventable disease, X number of people living on under $2 a day, just hearing these statistics and realizing, man, I spend $2 on a drink from the gas station. People are living on this, on just this every day. That really grabbed me, and I started annoying everyone around me and talking about this constantly. Like, what are we doing over here? Wasting our lives just trying to live in luxury or get rich. And so India was a country that I kind of narrowed down and zeroed in on. And like I said, I've been traveling here pretty much every year since I was 19 when I made my first trip. And I wanted to move, but I had no idea how. I didn't know anyone here. I wasn't exactly making enough money to support such a move before I started my own company. And so, got married, had some kids, and it took a while, but really that taking that first plunge, interestingly, into lawn care and into owning my own company is what really made it possible for us to move here. And to be financially self-supported, to start a company, get an employment visa. And so, yeah, it's been a dream of mine for much longer than business ownership, honestly. Like, I never thought I would own a business.
Wow.
Until I did it, which is interesting. And when I did it, it was partly I guess I would say mostly just out of necessity. Like I said earlier, I realized if we got pregnant and my wife had to quit her job, we'd be sunk. So I was like, I don't have a college education. I got to figure something out. And so that's when I started Eden Lawn Care, and I found that, man, I love it. Something about the ownership of every dollar you make, something about the communication with clients. Yeah, I suddenly realized, wow, this is amazing, and I don't know why I didn't do it earlier.
Well, I think it's, as an entrepreneur for 30 years now, there's just something about going out there and it's resting. I don't want to say all on you, but like, you have control over your destiny. Like, you go out there and you can create value for people. Like you talked about, I love Jim Rohn. I love his quotes. I read him and listen to him quite a bit. And it's just, I think, an amazing opportunity to serve others. And I think there's two types of wealth creation. There's an extraction model, which a lot of people have. How much can I extract from others and take unto myself? And then there's this value creation model, which obviously you ascribe to, which is how much value can I create for others in the world, and then what will they pay me for it? And so I love that. That was it's through necessity, but you found kind of your calling through that necessity. That's an awesome story. So what kind of unexpected benefits have you found for yourself and for your team moving overseas, whether that's professionally, personally, or spiritually? Anything that kind of really stands out? Because I'm sure if you really take time to contemplate, I know when I go over to India, it really is an eye opener, and it certainly gets you out of your normal everyday type of thinking.
Right. Yeah, I'll start with personally. So, India is a developing country. It's a country that, if you watch YouTube videos, you might not be too excited about visiting. And so obviously, there's the pollution or whatever stereotypes you want to throw out there that, you get used to it, but it is what it is. It's definitely a thing to adjust to. But I was surprised with all of the lifestyle advantages that we found moving here. So because of the exchange rate, because we're earning US dollars and spending rupees, kind of a life hack, by the way, we're able to afford things that we'd never be able to afford in the US, whether it's an amazing private school. So I'm sure I couldn't afford the quality of education that my kids get at a private school here in Dehradun in the States, at least not at my age. And domestic help we're able to afford. So we have a 5-year-old boy and 4-year-old twins. And when our twins were born, when our twins were...
That'll keep you hopping.
Yeah, sure thing. When my twins were born in the States, I remember we hired some help just because my wife was so overwhelmed. But man, it is so expensive, and we could only do it for a few hours a week. Well, here, you can give someone a good job. You can pay them above market rate, and it's very affordable to have domestic help. Affordable restaurants, There's a pretty tight expat community in the city where I live, and so you're all experiencing the same adventure together, and so it's really great to be able to build relationships. And then even with Indian nationals here, I found that because India is very relational, I'm less lonely here than I was in the U.S. They they'll come over to our house and just hang out, and that's one amazing thing about Indian culture. So much of the talking about suffering, so much of the suffering in the West, I would say, is just due to loneliness and mental health issues, and the kind of communal culture here in India mitigates against that. So yeah, definitely some hardships here, but some real advantages living in India. We also live in a really nice city. We lived in the capital region for a while, and the air pollution, just we couldn't handle it. So we moved about 5 hours north, right at the foothills of the Himalayas, in a city called Dehradun, and just a beautiful place, and we love it here.
The pollution in Delhi, or the NCR, is they call it National Capital Region, is intense. It's mind blowing. So yeah, but if you get up near the Himalayas, I'm sure it's beautiful. It's a beautiful area.
Yeah, especially in the fall. Like I remember when we were living in Greater Noida, the NCR region, every day it just got thicker. And there's a building not too far from our office, and every day it would get less visible until it just disappeared. And after a while, you just laugh. You're like, what is this? This is crazy. But yeah, raising kids there, we didn't feel right about that. And obviously, some people aren't able to move from there. And so it is a privilege that we're able to work remotely from anywhere in India. And so kind of found the city that was still in North India, close to the capital, Hindi speaking, but yeah, much cleaner air. And then I would say professionally, in answer to your question there, it's one of the best business models that we could have landed on. We didn't move to India because we wanted to make a bunch of money, but moving here and realizing, obviously outsourcing is not a new concept, but we tapped into our relational network in the US to get our first clients, and then being able to hire people, very skilled people, very qualified, many of them with master's degrees, and pay them, a third of what they would cost in the US, and we're paying them above market rate. It's a very solid business model, and I think it's going to work out really well for us.
It works out for everybody because it's a benefit to them. They're getting above average, and you're getting above average people. We have a very similar story. I didn't finish college either. I tell everybody that it's in my company has more education than I do.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a benefit to our team. They get paid well. They get to advance professionally very quickly, and then to our clients, we're able to offer great service. And I would say we're still a budget company. We're not the cheapest around, but we're able to give great service for a decent price. And then obviously for us, it's a great business model, very profitable. And then the other part of the professional benefit of moving here is, I just had to learn a new skill extremely fast. And, I took some courses, of course, on accounting, but there's nothing like just being thrown problems that you have no idea how to solve and just having to dive in and figure it out. It was like moving to another country, starting a company, and learning a new skill at the same time. It was extremely difficult, but one of the most rewarding experiences that I could have had. Just out of sheer necessity, we had to learn quick. And my brother had more experience, but yeah, I was pretty much new to it all.
It's amazing when you're put in those situations and you have to do it, do or die. Sun Tzu, in his book The Art of War, he says, putting yourself on death ground. Basically, he's like, I have to do this, and when you do that, you learn quick, right? You have to, and you kind of force yourself into this way of thinking where most people are like, I can't do this, and you're like, yeah, you figure out that you can actually do it. So that's amazing. Yeah. So I'm glad you were able to make that transition. That's a lot to handle at one time. The move, all the cultural changes, and everything else, but learning that new skill. But I think the thing that at least my impression is having started your own business in the U.S., it gives you an incredible advantage as opposed to have just being in bookkeeping or accounting, because you get that real world experience of being out there and understanding what your clients and customers are going through, like this is not just a P&L, right? This is their life, right? This is, whether you're having to tell them like, hey, you're losing money, and what are we going to do to help you, right? How can we use these numbers to help move your business and your vision along? And I think as business owners, sometimes the people that are kind of behind the scenes don't really understand that, and I'm sure you do, having been in and started your own company before this, before moving into the bookkeeping side. So it's a valuable experience.
Yeah, a lot of our clients are sort of in the same category that my lawn care company was in. They're small, medium-sized businesses, often doing construction, things like that. And so, yeah, having run a company myself for a number of years, when I describe my experiences, it really clicks, and you can kind of put yourself in their headspace as a business owner rather than just, talking accounting jargon to them.
So kind of moving on to some of the benefits for your employees, what kind of growth opportunities have you been able to give them, and learning opportunities for your team?
Yeah, so I'll start with our head of ops, Karan. So he joined us about a year ago, and he had experience working at another U.S.-based bookkeeping company, but it was a lot of just data entry, and the American business owner rarely came into the office. It seemed like he was just kind of putting in his hours. He was good. He knew basic accounting principles. He was really hardworking, but that was his previous experience. And so he almost didn't join us because we were a startup. Like he was a bit nervous about that. But then he did eventually join us, and we threw him in the deep end. Him and I both were doing data reviews where we were subcontracting under another company. So we were doing this for another bookkeeping firm, where we were going over their clients' files with a really detailed checklist and just finding every error we could find and creating a report of errors. And so Cutter and I were both doing that. We were both a bit in over our heads, but kind of that camaraderie of learning together. We had a whiteboard, and every time we'd finish one, we'd put it up there. And it was a great way for us both to learn and to kind of build that camaraderie. And then when we started getting our own direct clients, Tim and I were really busy building the company. Tim's the CEO, I'm doing sales and marketing. And so a lot of the actual operations fell on Cutten. He had learned enough from the data reviews, and when we started getting those direct clients, we started having him communicate directly with the clients and basically take complete ownership of the projects, which once again was another real stretch for him. But he did really well, and once again, early 2025, we got a bunch of new clients. This was right after we promoted him to head of ops, and so every one of these pushes, he really appreciates the push. And sometimes, we've thrown him in the deep end and he's gone underwater and come up sputtering, but I can tell like he appreciates the push. He's developing his skills quickly. Salary wise, he was able to advance very quickly. So yeah, I think it's been professionally a very transformative experience for him. And then Tim and I moved from NCR to Dehradun, and he stayed in Noida. Now he's able to build out a team there. And so he's working remotely from Tim and I, but he's building out his own team culture there, taking care of clients completely independently of us. And he shared multiple times how transformational it's been being part of this company and just the growth. I remember him recently when we promoted him to head of ops. He said that it's always been, and this is our company terminology again, but the comment he made was it's always been his passion to create value for clients, and he knew that one day someone would notice that and would give him the opportunities that he was looking for. And so yeah, it's been so exciting seeing him blossom as we've given him these challenges.
That's an awesome example there. And I think the thing that most people probably wouldn't understand, having worked in India before, is you talked about his ability to move up so quickly. That really doesn't happen a lot in India because it's more of a seniority type culture where, oh, I've been here the longest, so I get that position kind of thing, rather than more a meritocracy where if you can handle it, you're able to move up. And I think people don't really always get that opportunity. So it's great that you're able to give that, because I think that's important. As you're providing that value, you're able to reap some of the rewards. And so that's an awesome way that you're able to help them. So how do you coach members of your team and to provide value. That can be difficult. It might seem easy, on the surface, but it's much harder in practice.
Yeah, so from day one, it's baked into our company culture. So when a new team member joins, there's a lot of repetition that our clients' problems are our problems. We really clearly try to spell out our expectations and our company culture, which is the biggest asset for us is if you come across a problem, don't go to your senior, figure it out if at all possible. And sort of that tenacity to grow, like we always want to be growing, learning new skills, we offer our team free courses that they can take. We always want to be pushing to personally grow, but then always to find little ways to improve our clients' experiences, make their chart of accounts a little bit better, make their reports a little bit more meaningful. Always be looking for those little ways to add value. And there's something I thought of recently. So if a friend came to you with a big problem that they need help with, and you go over to their house and you work for 8 hours or 4 hours on it, and you're like, okay, I put in my time, I'm going to go home, but you didn't actually solve the problem, they wouldn't care less how many hours you put in helping them. I mean, maybe it's a nice gesture, but really they need their issue figured out. And so that's the culture we try to set, is like our clients, they don't really care what our hourly rate is, how many hours we put in. They've just got problems that they need solved, and they're willing to pay good money for it. And so yeah, we really try to, like I said, bake it into our culture. Our terminology from day one is, hey, we're out here to solve issues for our clients because they're busy, they have a ton of responsibility. We need to free up their time and get them the financial insights they need to scale their company.
I love that you start with culture. Really, that's really it. And we don't really understand. There's this David Foster Wallace had this talk called Water, and there's this analogy that he uses where an older fish is swimming by two young fish, and he says, "How's the water today, boys?" And the two young fish look at each other and says, "What's water?" And because it's all around us, and we don't really understand the culture we're in until you make a move like going to India or going to another country and understanding that there is different cultures, there is differences that need to be bridged or overcome, and there's benefits on both sides. Doesn't mean one's better or one's worse, but there is some bridging that needs to happen there, some learning on both sides to be able to be effective working in a cross-cultural type of situation. So kind of moving on to that is like, what are some of the blind spots as like an entrepreneur who wants to work cross-culturally and is working from a Western mindset? What is some things that they might not see that keeps them from being effective?
Yeah, so I can share a little bit about our journey. We thought, you come to India and there's just tons of qualified talent everywhere that'll be pounding your door down. And in a sense, it's true. We put out ads on LinkedIn, we have tons of applicants, but man, it's still hard to find cultural fits, just as hard as in the States. And so there's a lot of great talent, but if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking, oh, outsourcing, I'll find tons of great employees without putting in the hard work, that's just not the case. Hiring is still really hard work. Culturally, I would say work really, really hard to understand the culture where your team lives, and also work even harder to have your team understand your client's culture. I recently started reading a book called Speaking of India, and I'd started reading this book before moving to India and wasn't very interested, but after being here a year and a half, I started reading it and everything just started making sense. It's all about the cultural differences between Western countries and India, and so much of the confounding things about India just started clicking, where I'm like, oh, that's what they mean when they mean yes. It doesn't mean it means yes in Indian English, but it does not mean the same thing as yes in a Western country. And so many of those things where if you ask your team for feedback, like, do you think this is a good idea? In India, it's just culturally not acceptable to tell your boss that is a bad idea. So there's a way.
I'm laughing because I've been there,
Yeah.
and I've been there on fire a couple times, so I understand
Right.
that.
Now your team will tell you that they don't think it's a good idea, but it'll completely go past you because they will do it in the most roundabout way. To them, it communicates the message, but so there's this graph in the book that shows that there's indirect communication, there's direct communication, and then there's blunt or borderline rude communication. And so, or what to them is indirect communication, which is how an employee should speak to their boss. To us, we don't even have a category for us. It doesn't register for us. When they feel like they're being very direct, to us it's very indirect. And once again, we might not register the message. Only when your team in India is what they feel is rude, will it actually register with us that now you're communicating directly. And it goes the other way too. So our direct communication to them is very rude. And so we're talking to our team about this and telling them, hey, when talking to us and even when talking to clients, it's going to feel rude to you the way you communicate, but that's really the only way thick-skulled Americans are going to understand what you're trying to say. And so, that can be in employee to employer relationships, like even in client communication. All the time I'll have my team read my emails and I'm like, yes, I'm using his first name, which is shocking. Yes, I'm only doing a one-line email, and that's actually what they want. They don't want me to waste their time. And to them, it's so rude, but this is how we communicate in the West. And so, yeah, there are a lot of cultural things that is really important, and it's both ways. But I would say if your company is serving mostly Western clients, the heavy lifting needs to be on training your team to understand Western culture, because that's where a lot of the issues are going to stem.
Do they call you Titus, sir, or no?
Yeah, so they call this. They always call you sir for a while, and then eventually we're like, no, we don't want to be called sir. And so, man, what do they call me? Maybe they just don't. They just avoid the need to address me because it's so awkward to call me Titus. But yeah, but yeah, we always have to be like, yeah, sir is not. We don't want to be called sir. Baya is fine, brother.
I think that most people don't understand the power differential between India and in the US. Whereas I tell everybody, normally in India, the power differential will be like this. So your boss is up here, you're down here, and there's really very little communication. If there's communication, it's generally going one way, which is down. Whereas here in the States, I would say it's much more like this, where we're expecting, that feedback. We're expecting them to communicate more directly. And so it does take some time to overcome those cultural differences. So I think that's important, like you said, about, making sure that they understand, the culture in which they're working in. But I think it also does help to understand their culture as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great things about Indian culture. I mentioned some of them earlier, but this hierarchical thing, we don't mess around with that in our company. We're like, hey, we just don't do things that way here. We're a team. We're all working together. The politics, the hierarchies, we have no interest in that. So that's a pretty big learning curve. But I think they really like it. Like our employees seem to really enjoy the culture, and it's new. But every time someone joins a new team, they're kind of putting their feelers out, trying to understand how do things work around here. And I know when they're joining an American company, they're expecting some surprises. And I think for the most part, it's a pleasant surprise for them to realize, hey, like we're all equals here, and obviously, we're the boss, and there's decisions that have to be made. But yeah, like that more egalitarian, flat structure, I think is refreshing. Even for our Indian team members.
I think it just takes, there's this element of probably psychological safety that needs to be overcome in some ways. And it's difficult to kind of navigate that sometimes, but it can be a fun challenge too. So as you try to overcome that. So I'm curious, like, this kind of really dovetails into this. How do you handle conflict and leadership development in this context of these different cultures? Is there things that you've had to kind of work on or overcome with them? We kind of touched on understanding some of the cultural differences, but how do you break through some of those things to really get to where you need to go as a company?
Yeah, so conflict with our team is sort of non-existent because they just will not criticize you. Doesn't mean they're not annoyed at you. But and that's something we don't like. We want them to criticize us. But definitely there are issues when in India yes, I will have it done by Monday just does not mean that. And so when someone on our team says they'll have it done by Monday, like we actually expect them to get it done by Monday, and that kind of breaks their brain a little bit. And so that's created some tension, particularly with new hires. So, we have people on a probation period when we hire them, and some people it's like, well, if you cannot get stuff done by these deadlines that you told us, like we literally we tell people, if you think you can get it done by X date, get it done, or set the due date a week later to make sure, and it just doesn't register. And so that's certainly created some tension. Other than that, it's mostly been smooth sailing. I honestly, like, the biggest thing that I think we need to watch out for is just not taking advantage of sort of that hierarchical thing as the business owners. And it's also, it doesn't just apply to boss and employee, it also applies East and West. Sort of this Western superiority thing is not, it's global, and it's been internalized by people in the developing world, the majority world as well. And so always those are things to be cognizant of, and to be careful that it doesn't like seep into you that, oh yeah, we're from America, we're better. Because it's easy to, when it's kind of the water you're swimming in, and this is a global issue, it's easy to have that affect you negatively.
Well, I appreciate all of this. Do you have any like books or anything that you really recommend? I'm just curious, kind of for myself, for your team, that you'd like go, this will really help you to better understand what it's like to work with Americans. Anything that stands out?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, there's the book Speaking of India, which I would say it would probably be mostly for entrepreneurs working with Indian teams who are American, but it also is great for Indians too. There's a lot in there that I think for Indians who've been interacting with Westerners that they would read and have a lot of aha moments. So yeah, that's one recommendation I would have. Let me see, other general recommendations. I really appreciate Traction. Our company runs on, I don't know if you've heard of EOS.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that
Business
book
operating
is
system. Yeah.
right. Our company runs on that. So if anyone's listening, that's a great book to start with to kind of understand that framework.
So kind of as we wrap up, I appreciate your time. You've been very generous. What advice would you give an entrepreneur who's thinking of working overseas and cross-culturally? What would you tell them if they came to you and said, what would you recommend?
Yeah. So most startups fail, and I think it's probably even a higher percentage of startups that fail when you're like moving overseas. I think that the outsourcing model is really strong. So if you can figure out something that can be done remotely for Western companies or Western individuals, and sourcing it to talent from the developing world, that's a great place to start. Otherwise, you probably need a ton of capital. But yeah, there's so many needs and opportunities throughout the world. And I think just traveling, don't try to just move and start a company, obviously, without really doing your homework, traveling to the destination that you're interested in, and having your horizons broadened. Even if you're not thinking of moving or starting a company, international company, just traveling, seeing different places expands your world. Whether it's to places like Europe or to places in the developing world, it's obviously a completely different experience, but I would recommend it for everyone. It's a ton of fun. I love traveling, but even more than that, it's really eye-opening and expands your world. So I would say, yeah, do some traveling, experience a lot of different cultures, do your homework. Yeah, it's a good life. I love my life, and it's an amazing adventure. So privileged to be here and to be doing this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that I recommend for people if they have team overseas, that they could, kind of like the biggest leap you can make is going and visiting the people in the country. If you've never been there, it creates a bond like no other, and it really kind of endears you to them and them to you in a way that's really difficult to do remotely. And you can make a lot of progress very quickly, even though, it could be a 15-hour flight or 24-hour flight. It can be a little arduous sometimes, but I think it's well worth the time to do that. I think that's awesome advice. So tell us a little bit more about ProSynergy. Like, who is your client? I'd love for people that might be listening, that might be a good fit for you guys. What would that look like? Who do you generally work with? And, where can they find out more about you?
Sure. Yeah. So our sort of revenue range would be small and medium-sized businesses between 300,000 and 1 million in revenue. work for a lot of construction companies, but really any industry sort of in that revenue range is a good fit for us. Kind of where the business owner is too busy to do their own bookkeeping, but the company's too small to have a full-time in-house accountant. We want to help clients scale to where they can afford a full-time bookkeeper, but we want to kind of play our part in that range. And so, yeah, small, medium-sized businesses, preferably working with QuickBooks Online. Those are the folks who we help out. Folks who are what might be falling behind or hate bookkeeping. That's a common theme. Just struggling to get meaningful reports. Your accountant's yelling at you, whatever the pain point is, we're here to help. So you can go to ProSynergyBookkeeping.com. All the info's there, and schedule a call. It'll be with me.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all your insights and love your mission and where you're going. And I wish you all the best. And so from Beyond the Office, thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.